All right, welcome everybody. Welcome all our Torah Time viewers. Okay, so tonight we are learning Leilu Nishmat to Yirmiyahu ben Dov, Refuah Shlema to David ben Dov Bel, and also to Refuah Shlema to Yecheskel ben Tzila. Everyone is invited to join us every Thursday at 8 p.m. at 1601 Quentin Road, the BJX location. Women only, thank you. Okay, except for me. Okay. All right, so now we're continuing from last week. Last week we spoke about, we started off speaking about the hidden story of the destruction of the first temple. So now this week we're going to do a little bit of a veering in a little bit of a different topic, and that is understanding what we lost. Like what was going on? What was Jerusalem all about? What was the Bet HaMikdash all about? The glory, because it's very difficult when you tell somebody you have to mourn for something. If they don't know what they're mourning for, it's very difficult to connect to that. So the question that we want to start with is what is really the point of mourning? Why do we have to go and feel sad and cry and mourn and pray for the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash? It's something that we're constantly doing, that it's constantly on the Jewish person's mind. So the answer is that when you look at life, for the most part of it, we don't feel like we're lacking anything. And let me clarify what I'm saying by that. When we're going through life, we may feel we're lacking something physically. We may want more money. We may want more materialistic things, or even in the spiritual things. We may want to grow more spiritually. We may want to advance more in the spiritual realm. But we don't associate that with anything else that's missing on the outside part. We feel like it's missing on our part, meaning that if we work hard, then we'll be able to get it. If we go and we try very hard, then we'll be a righteous Jew. If we work very hard and we pray a lot and we do everything right, then we have a chance of being successful in the materialistic world. But the concept when there is something that is missing, we don't feel it, that's something that's missing in this world. And that's really, we're in the 3 weeks, right? It's known as the Ben HaMetzarim. These are the days between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz till Tisha B'Av. And during these days, we mourn to remind us that something is missing in our lives. We have to remind ourselves that something is going on, that something is missing. The concept is that during this time we have to learn what we're mourning for, and then we have to feel the pain. Now, to understand what it means to feel pain, there is a very interesting halakha that we do, and that is, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but if let's say you're benching, right? Let's say you're saying the grace after meals, the Birkat Hamazon, right? And you have a knife on the table. Are you allowed to leave the knife there? Are you supposed to take the knife off? Anybody know?
You should take it off.
You should take it off. There's a halakha that if you're benching, if you're saying the prayer after you eat bread, when you finish eating the meal, it's called grace after meals, Birkat Hamazon, you have to go and you take off the knife. So now why? What is the purpose of this? So let me give you about 5 different reasons. I figured I was really just going to give you the main reason why I wanted to, but I figured no one really speaks about this, so it's good to know. It's good to know what is the purpose behind this. So reason number 1 why we take off the knife when we bench is that the table represents the mizbeach, it represents the altar, and the Torah forbids to use anything to cut the stones of the altar with anything metal. Why? Because metal denotes something that could shorten human's life. A knife, a spear, a sword. These are things that are used to shorten people's life, and the whole mizbeach, that's all going around the opposite of it. So hence, because we're not supposed to use any metal objects on the mizbeach, and because the table is known as the mizbeach, the altar, hence we don't put anything on the when we're eating, yes, but when we're praying, when we're benching, we take the table off. We take the knife off. That's number 1. Number 2, a little bit more of a Kabbalistic answer, is in Birkat Hamazon, we don't have anything that ends. There's nothing that there's no pei sofit, the final pei. That letter does not exist in the Birkat Hamazon. Why? So the Kabbalist tells us there are a few harmful angels. And the names, just for learning purposes, is Shasaf, Kesef, Za'af, Negef, and Reshef. All of them end with the letter of the final pay. They all end with this type of letter. Now, because Birkat Hamazon, we're trying to avoid all these risks that could possess itself with these destructive forces. We remove that letter from the Birkat Hamazon. The same essence, a knife also is a destructive force. It's something that we want to free from harm. So we also remove the knife from the table when we do Birkat Hamazon. That is number 2. Number 3 is the Birkat Hamazon speaks about the building of the Mikdash, the building of the Bet HaMikdash. Now, in the Bet HaMikdash, when the third temple comes, there's not going to be any more warfare. There's not going to be any more wars. Everybody's going to be at peace with each other. So to symbolize that, we take off the knife, which also symbolizes war, and removing it symbolizes peace. Number 4, and this is, you have to know a little bit Hebrew for this, another Kabbalistic answer, is that the table has 4 primary things usually on it. They have a knife, which is in Hebrew, it's Lashon HaKodesh, it's sakin, and they have salt, which is in Hebrew, anybody know? Melach, very good. And then they have food, which is ochel, which is also starts with an aleph, and then they have finally lechem, which is bread. So you take all these 4 things, it spells out Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. It's the name of the Satan. Now we don't want the name of the Satan involved in the table, and where the panasai is, where the food is, where the nourishment is. So before Birkat Hamazon, we remove the knife, we take out the sakin, we take out the samach, and we bring back a kos. We bring back a kos, which is the cup which we make Birkat Hamazon on, and with those letters now, instead of Samach Mem Aleph Lamed, which is the name of the Satan, all of a sudden it spells one of the names of the very powerful angels, Michael. So we're taking that off. It's sort of symbolizing the Kabbalistic, power behind it. The Arizal also says, we're not going to get into this, that people from the source of the root of neshama, of the soul of Cain, should remove the knife from the table. And because we don't know where a source of our root of our soul is, so we just take it off. Those are all just whatever. Just this was extra credit. Just wanted to let you guys know some extra reasons why we're supposed to take off our knives when we are praying the Birkat Hamazon. There is another reason, and the other reason is that during Birkat Hamazon, you're praying for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim, right? We're praying for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. Now, when we're praying for that, if there's a knife, if somebody really mourns for something, and if somebody really feels this pain that the Jerusalem and the temple was destroyed, they may come to a situation where they take the knife and they can harm themselves. And in fact, there was an incident. There was an incident that somebody was in such pain over this that he took a knife and he stabbed himself. And the sages instituted that from now on, no more knives, because it's too dangerous in this area. Now, Rabbi Shraga Feivel Mendelovitz, which was the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Vodaas in Williamsburg, that's when it was in Williamsburg, during 1948, this is when the Arabs broke into the old city, and the old city was being destroyed by the Arabs. The rabbi heard about this and the destruction during that Friday night, that Shabbat. He was reciting Uvnei Yerushalayim, the building of Yerushalayim, and he was so distressed over the information that he just heard and over of what he was thinking about when he was praying about the building of Jerusalem, that he went and he actually had a heart attack. He had a heart attack on Shabbat from this. So this is what you mean by feeling the pain. I'm not telling anybody to stab themselves or make themselves have a heart attack, chas v'shalom, but you understand the level of the righteous people, of where they were, where they had, that they affected them so much. Like nowadays, it's so unfortunate. I really don't want to get too much into it, but there's some people, what do they do on Tisha B'Av? They find sad movies to watch. I'm like, that is the worst. No. We do Schindler's List. We do something else that has genocide in it, something that will really get us in the mood of it. I'm like, that's not getting you in the mood of it. That's even good for some people. Some people, unfortunately, they just watch some stuff just to cruise through the fast. Nowadays people can't fast. Happens to be you live in the day and age that everybody fasts almost all the time. You're so rushing and running around. Before you know it, it's like midday, you didn't eat anything. And you're like, you're not even so hungry. But if it's a day, if it's a fast, the second that you wake up, you'll be like, I'm dying. Oh my God, I need water. You're calling your rabbi, you'll be like, I think I'm going to go to the hospital. Today's not a fast. Oh, never mind. I'm okay. I can last a few more hours. It's all psychological. Everything in our mind is psychological. That's why it's easier for people to lose weight when they're not on a diet, when they're just busy. When they're on the diet, what are they thinking about? Only everything else. They know all the calories of everything. They could even invent, this is like a guacamole salad with tortillas. They could add everything into it. I'd be like, yeah, of course, 450 divided by 2 to carry the 1. That's like 4,000 calories right there, by just smelling it. Because when you're avoiding to do something, you're involved with it so much. You can't think of anything else. That's all you're involved. And it's very unfortunate. The purpose of the fast is not to starve yourself. You have the kids, they just finished eating a meal and they're like, I'm starving. I haven't eaten ever in my life. We live in a situation where we're always thinking, about what we can't have. So if someone tells you can't eat the food, you're like, I need it, so badly. No, but it's not edible. It doesn't matter. I still need that. It's like, imagine you go and you rent an apartment, and it's a mansion. and say everything is yours, you cannot open this door. In fact, everything for you is going to be free, but the second that you open this door, we're going to charge you. So if you're a good Jew, meaning that meaning that you follow the laws, so then you won't open that. But the curiosity is going to be like, well, what's behind that door? Like you won't be able. Every time you walk past by, you'll be like, oh no. You won't be able to hold yourself back because when you say you can't do something, all of a sudden you have to do it. Now, when you think about a fast day is not only about not eating. A fast day is supposed to, it causes you, discomfort to realize that there's more important things to focus on in life. There's something very important that's going on here. We're mourning the destruction of the temple. Now, if the only way you could get through Tisha B'Av is through watching movies, then you're missing the point. If the only way that you could get through Tisha B'Av is by, going and taking about a 6.5 hour nap. I'm not saying you're not supposed to nap. You can nap. You do whatever it is that you need to do. But the purpose is really to mourn the destruction of the temple. And when you're considering dealing with the destruction of the temple, you look at the sages, look at the rabbis, where they just heard about a recent infiltration to the old city. They already caused them to have a heart attack. Do you understand the level of difference of what we're dealing with? That nowadays we don't even understand it. And this is a rabbi that it wasn't so long ago. It was last generation. In June 1967, the Israeli paratroopers captured the old city. And not too long ago, we showed a video in this class, about the going in. You see the Israeli soldiers crying by the Kotel, by the Western Wall. And there was when this was happening, there was one secular Israeli soldier that was standing behind everybody else. Everybody was crying. All the religious soldiers were crying by the Western Wall, and there was one soldier that was very far behind, and he was also crying. So one of the religious people went over to him and says, "Why are you crying?" And he tried to stop crying. He says, "I'm crying because I don't know why I need to cry." Do you understand what he said? He says, "I'm crying because I don't know why I should cry." So some people don't even realize that's also a sad reason. When we're going through Tisha B'Av, when we're trying to figure out the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, we should also cry that we don't even know what we're missing. We don't even know what we're lacking in this sense. One of the concepts is that if you don't feel the loss, then when one of the first questions that they ask you when you get up after 120, they ask you a few questions. One of the questions is Tzipita leYeshua. Did you await the salvation? Did you await the redemption of Mashiach? And when you think about it, why, you're clear. So not anymore. Okay. So but for the most part you are. So okay, no problem. If anybody is looking for a shidduch. Okay, I'm joking. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe not. So. No, nobody saw you. Can we turn the camera, please, and focus? Okay. So, all right. So now, by the way, this is my fault because I have, I don't know if you call it ADD or lack of ADD, but the second that something happens, I'm there as well. So, no, it's not a problem. It's entertainment, right? After all, that's what we're here for, right? Oh, we're learning Torah, right? I'm sorry. So now, when you're going and when after 120 you go and they say, Tzipita leYeshua, did you await salvation? Did you await the redemption? And what are you going to be like? Yeah, I did. What did you wait for? You don't know anything about it. You don't know what happened with the Bet HaMikdash. What was with the destruction? What was life like? Imagine that. What was life like when they had a Bet HaMikdash? Imagine living in Jerusalem while you had a Bet HaMikdash. Can you imagine that for a second? You can't. I mean, I can. Maybe you could. It's so mind-boggling to think about it. It's something that we can't even comprehend. So, when you look at Judaism as compared to other religions, this is the way that and this is not all religions, and I don't want to generalize, but generally that you have, I am generalizing, generally the way that you have it is that, let's say you have religious people in another religion. So what they have in the center is themselves. And this is where they are. And around them, that's where they place God. Meaning that they could go anywhere they want and they'll bring God with them. They could do anything they want and they'll bring God with them. You look at, for example, somebody in the Christian faith. So in the Christian faith, you're able to live anywhere in the world, not a problem. You don't have a church nearby there, you could do it via webcam, right? You could eat whatever you want. You could send your kids to any schools that you want. It's pretty much you could go wherever it is that you want. Pretty much most of the religions are like that. But you look at the Jewish religion. The Jewish religion is just the opposite. First there is God, and then everything life focuses around it. Where is the proof for this? Where did Jews live? Jews don't move out to like far out places. Jews live, religious Jews, where do they live? They live where there is a synagogue, where there's kosher food, where there is places that they could send their kids to school in a religious environment. And that's why, this is also how real estate works in the Jewish market. Real estate, and I was speaking to somebody today, and I said, maybe I'm wrong in this, but I think so you have, let's say, the regular, like you call them, let's say, the yeshivish Orthodox Jews, and then you have like the Hasidic Orthodox Jews. Where do you think real estate prices go up more? I said Hasidic. He's like, what, you're racist? Because he was Hasidic. But I think it's true. I think it's true that you have, and what do you think, if you think about it, you look how Jewish communities, grow and develop. Is first you have a bunch of Jews moving to a certain place. Generally, it's very rare that you have a bunch of Jews moving into a new place, like out of nowhere, like Oklahoma. I don't know if there's a Jew in Oklahoma, right? Cults move to Oklahoma?
No, it's in like random places.
Oh, like right, yeah, basically where they can't, nobody could find them. But you don't have random Jews, 10 Jews go and move over there. Why? Because what are they going to do with schools? What are they going to do with kosher food? It's very difficult to find it. So that's why you have Jews in very central areas. And what happens when that central area becomes overpacked? So they expand that central area anymore. That's why originally when you're looking at Brooklyn, so it used to be very heavily in Bar Park. And then eventually went to Flatbush, and then eventually went to Marine Park, and then eventually went to Mill Basin, and then obviously at the same point in time you had Far Rockaway, and you had Queens, and you had different places, but they're all around the same centered in the same area. Then you have Muncie, and then all of a sudden the yeshiva in Lakewood opened up, was like 50 something years ago. So you have all of a sudden it's all absorbed around it. It's God in the middle, and then Jewish life is around it. In the other secular world, there is the life that's centered, and then they bring God or spirituality around it. They can go wherever they want and do whatever it is that they need. There's another concept of this Jewish identity is if somebody goes and knocks at your door at 10 o'clock at night, or 11 or 12, whatever it is, depending when you're up, right? Knocks at your door, and they're collecting charity. They need to go and raise money for the daughter's wedding. And you go, because you're a good Jew, and you give money. Now, let's just picture that happening in France, to a Frenchman. There's one Frenchman, right? They have what is that called? That side hat?
A beret.
They have the beret. They're drinking some wine and they have a baguette, right? And they knock at some Frenchman's door and they say, "Bonjour, whatever." Right? I'm making a wedding. We need more baguettes and wine and whatnot. Can you please help? What are they gonna do? Now, Frenchmen are very. Have you ever met a Frenchman or a French woman? They're very proud. They're very proud. No, she's Jewish. So, French, I've been to France. In my opinion, I may be like very oblivious. I think everybody in the world, in every country, pretty much knows a little bit of English. A little bit. They know what you're talking about, right? So you can pretty much get either English or Chinese, except for Asians. Right? Let's get a little controversial, shall we? There's the sweetest. She's like, 4 feet tall. She carries like so many cans. You know what I'm talking about? The person. Everybody. It's the same person, by the way. It's all over the place, right? She's the same person. She always comes. Yeah. No, not the cleaner. She collects cans. She comes to by my house all the time, and she goes and she collects. Does she listen to the class? She doesn't know English. So she goes and she always talks to me whenever I'm outside. She talks to me in fluent Chinese. I don't know if it's Mandarin. I don't know the difference. In fluent Chinese, and I'm like. Every time I'm like, I'm sorry, and I don't even know how to say no español. I don't even know how to say that in Chinese. And like, no matter week after week after week, she knows I don't speak a word of English. I probably don't speak a word of English either. She knows that I don't speak a word of Chinese, but yet she's always going and she's. But you think about it, like, so people, like, most people know English. There's a few, but I went to France, right? And I was in France, and I needed like some simple directions. Nobody would speak in English. They're like, American. American. It's like the French, the words, the French, American. I'm like, where's the toilet? I'm like, just help me out over here. Just point out. I'm like, that's a universal language, right? But like, no. Like, maybe it was just the Frenchmen that I met. I don't know. But how do we get this? What are you doing over there? Okay, so now when you think about it, a Frenchman, right? Very proud to be French, right? They go and they knock. Let's say they come to America, and one Frenchman sees another Frenchman and says, "Hey, I need help. I'm building an institution to teach French, to the French, people. Is that guy going to give him charity? Most likely not. Maybe yeah, most likely not. Yet you have Jews coming from all over the world, coming to other people, not in the community. They may speak, Yiddish, they may speak Hebrew. You may not know them. They just do this, and you do that. Or whatever, depends on or whatever it is, right? Or this. You're giving money, right? You're giving money. All of a sudden, why? How are Jews so connected? Why is it, if you think about it, why? Why is it that Jews are connected no matter where you are? You see another Jewish person, you're willing to open up your checkbook. For them. And even more so, it's like you're doing it for like schools in Israel, for schools in France, for something that mikvah over there. It doesn't even have to do with anything over here. It's something that's unheard of in any other religion. Now, why would that be? Like when you think about it. So, Judaism evolves, it's first centered God and everything else focuses around it. Now when we're thinking about the center of God, everything is focused on that. So every Jew is connected to every Jew. And Jews are always focusing around where is going to be a kosher place. Where am I going to be able to send my kids to school? Where am I going to be able to pray? Where am I going to be able to buy? Everything is focused on that. Now when you're dealing with such a heavy focus, where do you think the center of that focus was? The center of all the focus of everything that every Jew ever had was in Jerusalem, was in the temple, was in the Bet HaMikdash. So when you think about it, this is not something that's like, okay, there was somebody who had a nice place of prayer and it was destroyed. This was the center of everything that we represent. This is where all Jews congregated 3 times a year, in fact. So we begin to understand the level of what we had going on. When you think about it, let's say somebody had this huge mansion, and he was very proud of this mansion. This mansion was in the family for 400 years. It's built by his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And there's like the emblem, what is it called? When they have the emblem of the family, the powerful families that have their own, the crest. So they had the crest engraved and all different parts of the thing. And every year he would host a huge event with all his distant family, and they would take them on a tour. He was very proud of it, the owner of this mansion. He was very proud of it. He would take them on tours. This is where his children, live. Even after they got married, the mansion was so big that they were able to live over there. It was something, this was his pride and joy. In fact, this is where he made his money as well. There was plenty of treasures and plenty of priceless items that he had over here, and this is how he lived from his, from this inheritance. Now, one day he comes home, and there's a huge fire that breaks out, and the entire mansion is destroyed. And he's running over there. He sees there's a, what is it called, like a 10-alarm fire, right? There's like every fire truck from every fire station is all over there. They're closing the fire to the best of their ability, and he's trying to scream and he's crying and he's trying to get there. They're holding him back. Eventually, the fire gets died out, and he goes and he assesses his loss. He realizes that he had some family, some children that actually got stuck over there, and unfortunately, he lost some children. And not only that, he lost his entire mansion and everything priceless, and everything he lost. Meaning that yesterday, this guy had everything. He had family, he had money, he had possessions, he had everything going for him. Today, he had absolutely nothing. Could you imagine the devastation? He was homeless, no insurance. For any Jewish person that's thinking about that. No, nothing. He's left from being the multi-billionaire to being homeless overnight. And if you don't think that it can happen now, it happens now all the time, and it also happened throughout history. You think about the loss that this person had. He lost family members. He lost children. He lost relatives. He lost everything that he ever cared about is gone. Can you imagine living through that? This plus worse is what the Jews went through the temple when the temple was destroyed. When the temple was destroyed, a lot of Jews died. A lot of the Jews perished. A lot of people lost their homes, lost their family members. When we speak about next class, we're going to speak about what actually went on during the siege and during the actual war. It's Holocaust. It really was a Holocaust. The idea of when we're thinking about Jerusalem, it's very interesting that we tend to only think about like the temple really during this time of the year. But really, we mention it every single day. In fact, we mention it in Hamikdash. We mention it in Shemona Esrei 3 times a day. We go and we pray for Yerushalayim. We also go on after Pesach, by the end of the Pesach Seder, and by Yom Kippur, we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. We're constantly saying Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Every Jewish wedding, we go and we break a glass so that we don't forget, right, and to remember the destruction of Jerusalem. The Jewish people, in essence, never really forget about Jerusalem. You think about it, like, why is it so important? You ever wonder, like, why are we so focused on the past? There was once, I don't know if it was Napoleon. I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Napoleon. It was Napoleon? You don't even know what I'm saying, but yeah. So, but you probably do know what I'm saying. That's why, you got it. So that said that he once saw this powerful ruler once saw a bunch of Jews mourning for something and said, "What are you mourning for?" He says, "We're mourning for." It wasn't the point, right? Was the mourning say? I was right, and then I knew that you knew. So he said, "What are they mourning for? They're mourning for the destruction of the temple." He says, "When did this temple, destroy, die? When did this happen? Last year? When did it?" He's figuring somebody is going. If you see the righteous people, they're literally sitting on the floor and tears are coming down their eyes in the morning of the destruction of the temple. He says, "When did this happen?" And they say about 2,000 years ago. He says, "You're mourning for something for 2,000 years?" He says, this is a nation that's going to persevere. This is something that's going to last. But somebody who doesn't forget the past, I forgot the other, it's a good word, a good line. Someone who doesn't forget the past, knows his future, whatever, blah, 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 something really cool, everyone goes, wow. Yeah, that was that type of line. Oh, that's something else, though. That's somebody who doesn't learn from the history. But when we think about Jerusalem, the holy site, the Temple Mount, that is something that's not only new to like when King David, was king, when Shlomo HaMelech went and he built a temple. This was already like since the beginning of time. In fact, it's known as the God created the universe from that center. It's known as the foundation stone. The foundation stone of the world happened from where the Bet HaMikdash was. And in fact, this is where Adam was created. Cain and Hevel went and they built their altar over there. Abraham bound Yitzchak to the altar, also over there. Yaakov had a dream about the ladder, also over there. And then what did he say? It says, Ki im bet Elokim v'zeh sha'ar Shamayim. This is the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So this is where heaven and earth connect. Now, Rabbi Victor Miller goes and says that the Bet HaMikdash was not a place of just like place where you bring korbanot and when you have prayer services. This was the dwelling place of God. This is where God dwelled. It says in Exodus, in Shemot chapter 25 verse 8, it says, "V'asu li mikdash," and you will build for me a sanctuary, v'shachati b'tocham, and I will dwell inside you. Now the question is like, what is that? Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Usually it would say, you build me a sanctuary and I'll dwell inside it. What did it say? It said, no, I'm going to build. You're going to build a sanctuary, and I'm going to dwell inside you. Meaning that the Bet HaMikdash had such a power that it caused the Hakadosh Baruch Hu to dwell in each and every single one of us. Meaning that when you go over there, when you think about it, imagine a place where it's so obvious that there's a God. Like there's some people that. Whoever was in my previous class met some of those people that may or may not believe in God. May say that no such thing as God. Right? They call them atheists, agnostics, losers, whatever it is. Depending on your terminology, idiotics. So when you think about it, when you say like, okay, they could say like maybe there is no God, and really, if you look into the world, you could see that there's a God. But also, if you look into the world and if you're influenced by a lot of the culture of where we're living and a lot of the concept of evolution and the Big Bang, where it shows basically that there is no God. So yeah, you don't have to be so far-fetched. And I shouldn't say idiotic because maybe you got involved in the culture and this is where you sort of grew up, and it's not your fault. This is all that you have. When you consider what was going on in the temple, in the Bet HaMikdash, everybody that went there knew that God existed. It was so obvious. There was no such thing as an atheist. There was no atheistic Jew back then. Everybody was religious. Everybody kept the Torah. Obviously, after a certain point in time, people, went off, and then we had the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. But you had at the prime, this is where everybody followed. Everybody knew God existed. It was very, very obvious. Imagine a time that living, in that sense where everybody knew God existed. And Chachamim tell us that when King Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon went and he built the temple wasn't only for Jews. The temple was also for the non-Jews as well. Non-Jews were able to go and build korbanot. And in fact, Shlomo HaMelech asked that God will heed the prayers of the non-Jews as well, those who come to the temple. And the non-Jews used to come and bring korbanot. It was open to everybody. It wasn't what is that called when you go to a certain synagogue and you have to pay a yearly membership? Yeah, only members only. Into this. It wasn't there what?
Yeah, it wasn't there.
The soreg?
Yeah, they couldn't go past it.
Depending on who, no. So you were allowed to bring korbanot, and depending on who it was, if it was an idol worshiper, there's a lot of different. But in general, a good Gentile would be more than welcome to bring korbanot. How and when they went, okay, that's a different story. Now, when let's try to understand the size of Yerushalayim. I'm about to tell you a few things that it's going to seem impossible to you. And it's going to seem like it doesn't make any sense. I'm just repeating the words of the Chachamim, the Chazal, what they tell us about Yerushalayim. So that many people, so we know that people used to go and travel 3 times a year, the Shalosh Regalim to Yerushalayim. There are many people that wanted to live in Yerushalayim. Like nowadays, you have people that live in Yerushalayim. The real estate market is very, very expensive. In fact, it's expanding and it's expanding. But it's a very, and people want to live there. Imagine you have an apartment that oversees the kotel. Imagine that. I know somebody who has an apartment over there that oversees the kotel. Imagine what that's worth. Can you imagine that? You wake up in the morning, you see the kotel. Some people wake up in the morning and see Niagara Falls, right? And they're like, well, it was 7 wonders. Imagine that you're in the holiest of the holiest place. I mean, you obviously get desensitized to it, but imagine living in that. You look at Eshet Torah. There's a lot of yeshivot that were built in that. It's a different world. It's a different concept. Especially when you're coming from America and you go and you see the kotel for the first time. It brings so much emotion, especially if you haven't seen it in a while. And then you think about it, imagine the people that are able to do this every single day. And there are people that go there every single day. They go to they go and they pray, the tunnels. They're all in there. And just imagine the holiness that they have to, that they get to experience. Now, there's a lot of people back in time of the first temple that they wanted to live in Yerushalayim. Obviously, it was a hot, it's all about the real estate was very, very popular over there. And in that area, there were 480 synagogues in Yerushalayim alone. Now, each synagogue doesn't mean that you had a synagogue that, rabbi opens up and there's like 10, 15, 20 people in there. Each synagogue was a community. That each synagogue had its own educational system and had like everything, its own mikvah. Everything was surrounding it. Now, each of these, let me take you through a little journey and stay with me for a second. There was 24 main squares in Jerusalem. Each square had 24 main streets. Each main street had 24 smaller streets. Each of these smaller streets had 24 smaller pathways, and each of these smaller pathways had 24 courtyards, and each courtyard had 24 homes. Now, a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Meir Lambreski did a little calculation. What does this mean? Like, what is this, like the 24, like, what does it come up to? So if you take the 24 squares and you times it by 24 main streets, you come up to 576 main roads. That's how many roads Jerusalem had. Now, you take that and you times it by the side roads, which is another 24, you come up to 18,824 side roads. You take each of those side roads and you times it by the 24 smaller passages, you have 331,776 smaller passageways. And that leads us to how many each of the smaller passageways. They each had 24 courtyards. That leaves you to 7.9 million courtyards. When you do that, I'm not even going to go to the next one, but it's over 100 million homes. Now, it seems very far-fetched. How could you fit 100 million homes? It doesn't make any sense, when you think about it. So the Gemara in Gittin says that the land of Eretz Yisrael is compared to a deer. That when you take off the skin of a deer, you're never going to be able to put it back together again. Like Humpty Dumpty, right? The deer comes off, you can't put it back because it stretches. When it's off the deer, it sort of shrinks. So the same thing is Israel. Israel also is known to stretch. And we know this is a very famous concept. We spoke about it last time when the Jewish people went into the Bet HaMikdash and they were all crowded. Everybody was crowded like bumper to bumper traffic. When they needed to bow down, they needed to bend down, all of a sudden everyone had plenty of space. So it was known there were miracles that were happening in Israel regarding space. Now, when you think about the sheer number of people that lived in Jerusalem, it's mind-boggling. And ordinarily, you think, okay, this is an exaggeration. I'm like, are you kidding? Over 100 million homes. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to tell you the number. It's 191 million homes that they claim, that the Chazal, the way that they do the calculation, how they claim. This is what they say. This was what was in Jerusalem. Now, even if you say it's an exaggeration, it still shows you a sheer number of what actually existed. But I tried to do a, sort of a population census. See what the Jewish people started at 600,000 men. You're talking about in the time of Har Sinai, you had about 3 million people. And assuming general population, I'm not even going to go through the numbers. So I did the numbers. The numbers were crazy. I'm not even going to, because the numbers are, you're talking about from Har Sinai to about the destruction of the first temple is about 900 years. Imagine you take 3 million Jews over a period of 900 years. And these were religious Jews, not Jews that first, not that what I'm about to say, it doesn't mean you're not a religious Jew, but some people like, I'm not going to get married until I find a parnassah, I'm not going to get married until blah, 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 and they get married when they're about 40, 50, 60, 70, and then maybe they decide to have 1.5 kids. I'm not talking about that. You're talking about people that saw God. So when it was time for them to get married, they found the right person and they got married. They got married, ask your great-grandparents how old they were when they got married, right? Kal v'chomer of Kal v'chomer, what did they get married in the time of about 2,000, 3,000 years ago? So you take 3 million and you take it over a period of 900 years, and a period of where it's peace and serenity for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are following the Torah, and they're going, imagine the numbers, and just use your imagination. I'm not even going to tell you the numbers. Imagine the numbers of what it goes up to. So yes, it does sound mind-boggling of how many, to say 191 million homes in Jerusalem, but even if this is an exaggeration, this just tells you the size of what Jerusalem was. When we go to Jerusalem now, especially when you go to the old city, look at a small place, you can walk around it. Right? Assuming that you know where you're walking, otherwise you're going to be in a place that you're not going to get out of. But you go over there, it seems like a very small place. We don't understand the sheer size and of how many people actually lived and were destroyed in this place. The Midrash in Echad Rabbah says that how large it was is that there was once a man who was going, and he had 200 camels with him, and he wanted to go and he wanted to sell peppers that were meant to spice food. Now, each camel carries about 200 liters. This is the calculation that Rabbi Meir Lambrewski goes and says. Now, if you take 200 camels times 200 liters, you come to a number of 40,000 liters. 40,000 liters of spices this guy was carrying around, he wanted to sell. Now, he stopped off in a city called Tzul, and he met there a tailor. And the tailor says, "What you doing?" He says, "Oh, I have a bunch of spice that I want to sell." He says, "Can I see it?" So he says, "Listen, I'll show it to you, but I want to sell it to somebody." He says, "Okay, maybe I'll buy it." He says, "No, I want to sell it to one person. I want to sell this 40,000 liters to one person." So he says, "Listen, in the city of Tzur, you're not going to find somebody like that." So the guy says, "Fine." He goes and he continues traveling, and he goes to Yerushalayim. He goes to Yerushalayim, he meets another tailor. And the tailor says, "What you doing? What you got there?" And he says, he lost faith in this tailor, and the tailor says, "Listen, tailor, it's not for you. Go back to cutting your leather. Just let me do it. I'm going to sell, the spice." So the tailor was like, whoa. Hey, why can't you show it to me? Maybe I'll buy it from you. He says, no. I'm looking for somebody who's going to buy my whole stock. And he says, "Okay, show me what you got." And he says, "You're a tailor. You're not going to have the money for it. Come on, let's not play games." And the tailor said, "Listen, if I don't buy it, I'll find you a buyer." So the guy says, "Fine." He showed him the merchandise. The tailor liked it. The tailor said, "Follow me." He brings it to his storehouse. He opens up the doors, and it's filled up with like a bunch of gold and silver coins. And the tailor asks him, says, "Do they use this currency in your place?" And he says, "Yes, they do." So he says, "Take whatever it is that you owe, and whatever it is that you want for the sale price, and I'll take the merchandise." So the guy said, "Fine, done, deal." Took his value, and he kept on going. Meanwhile, this merchant said, "You know what? I'm in Jerusalem already. Sold all his wares. He was successful." He says, "Let me stay in Jerusalem and let me see what's going to be over here." So he goes. He's in Jerusalem. The next day he meets his friend, and his friend tells him, "What you doing over here?" He says, "Oh, I'm selling some spice. I sold some spices." And he says, "Oh, I'm looking for some pepper spices. Do you have? I want to buy from you." He says, "No, I'm sorry. I already sold it to somebody else. But I'll bring you to this guy, and I'm sure he'll sell it to you." So he goes the next day. He brings it to this guy. And he says, "This person, my dear friend, wants to buy some spices from you, the ones that I sold you yesterday." He says, he figured, look at this, I'm bringing you even customers. And the tailor says, "I'm sorry, we sold out." He said, "What do you mean you sold out?" He's like, "Yeah, we sold out." He says, "There was 3 batches of people that came. The first batch, I only allowed to sell. There was a shortage of pepper, of the spice. The first batch, I was only allowed to sell a certain amount. The second batch, as I was going, I said, everybody's only allowed to buy half. He said, by the third batch, we were all gone." He says 40,000 liters of spice was gone in a day. So can you imagine how many people, and each person was only allowed to buy a small amount. Can you imagine how many people lived in Jerusalem? How many people that these are the people that just went to buy it. Not everybody went in Jerusalem to buy it. Another way that you could see the sheer population of what was in Jerusalem is the Kohanim. The Kohanim are only a small portion of the tribe of Levi. There are 12 tribes. Kohanim is just a section of one tribe. When the Bet Hamikdash was dedicated, Shlomo HaMelech brought 22,000 olah sacrifices and 120,000 sheep sacrifices. Now the Mishnah Yuma tells us that in olah you need to have 24 kohanim to bring that korban. For the sheep you need 11 kohanim. Meaning, so if you do a simple calculation, if you take the 22,000 cattle that were sacrificed, and each one needed to use 24 kohanim, you come up to a number of 528,000 kohanim. Then this is what on day one of the inauguration of the dedication of the Bet Hamikdash. 528,000 kohanim needed to do for that. Then you take 120,000 sheep, times it by the 11 kohanim that are needed per each sheep. Then you get to a number of 1.3 million kohanim. You add those two numbers together, you get 1.8 million kohanim. Now, even if you say the kohanim were recycled, right? So they were used that, and they were used again, Even if you say, so what? So you had 1 million kohanim? But 1,000,000 kohanim is just a fraction of what the people that lived actually there. So you imagine the amount of people. Now again, it's not so far-fetched when you think about the population growth of the Jewish nation and where they started off was, and especially from Egypt. So when you think about it, it may sound, so when we think about the destruction of the temple, we look at it, it's not a small number of people that passed away. It's not a small number of people that lost. In fact, during the second temple, when the Asians, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember these numbers off the top of my head, but if I'm not mistaken, the Asian population was what was it, 50 million or 500? 50 million people, and the Jewish population was, let's say, 20 million people at that time. And now the Asian is like 1 point something billion people with like a birth rate restriction, and the Jewish population is only like 13, 14 million people, which means this is from the time of the second temple. So when you think about it, the sheer numbers that we had is mind-boggling. And if we wouldn't have had the destruction, imagine how many Jews would be alive today. Like, you know how everywhere you go you see, and nothing. I love Asians. I like that don't worship Avodah Zarah. I love them, right? Though I have nothing against them, but you see them everywhere, right? Wherever you go, you could travel anywhere around the world, and they're there. They got that camera, the Canon camera with the zoom that could go to the moon. Right, and they over there, and they're the best tourists. They go around, and they're great. There's nothing wrong against them. But imagine that's what you have, Jewish person. Imagine you go over there. I mean, so you have Chabad everywhere around the world, also on the moon. You have Chabad everywhere. But imagine you have, like, everywhere you go, imagine you'll see another Jew. Can you imagine what it was? And I'm not saying that we'll take over the world. I'm just saying the population of what you have, the family members that you would have, the infrastructure that we would have if we wouldn't have been destroyed. You think about it. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy number. So, when in the time the Midrash in Eicha Rabbah, in the time of King Agrippas, he wanted to estimate how many people came and gave a Korban Pesach during the Pesach holiday. So he said, I want everybody, every time someone gives a Korban, I want you to take one of the kidneys and put it on the side. I want to see how many people are bringing these Korbanot. And afterwards, they tallied it up, and they tallied up 12 million kidneys. 12 million kidneys that they found. And now, one person doesn't bring Korban Pesach. You could bring it up to 10 people or more, minimum of 10 people, because each person just needs to have a kazait of a Korban Pesach. So you can have, sometimes you have 10 or 100 people bringing Korban. So you have, the numbers are crazy. The numbers are absolutely mind-boggling. So you think about over here, this is not like a city that was destroyed many, many years ago. This is an empire. This is a Jewish empire that we had. This is the center of it all, and we lost it all. Now, not only the population we lost, there was also a very, very special wisdom that the Jewish people had. And I want to share with you a few stories in regards to the wisdom that the Jewish people had. There was a man who was traveling from Jerusalem. He went to a far country to do business, and as he was doing business, he felt like his end was near. So he found a trustworthy innkeeper, and he said, "Listen," he says, "I feel my end is near, and I know my son is going to come looking for me. And he's going to want to, he wants to inherit my property. Obviously, he's going to come looking for me, but it could also, as a wealthy man, he says, maybe somebody else is going to be an imposter. Maybe somebody else is going to go and is going to want to go and also take my property. So I told my son he has to show 3 signs of wisdom. If he shows 3 signs of wisdom, then it's my son, and then you can give him the property and on all my possessions." So the innkeeper agreed. The innkeeper was an honest person. He agreed with it. Short while after that, this person, in fact, did die. And the son saw that he wasn't coming home, so he went to search for him. So he realized, he knew where his father was going. He went to this particular town, and there was a law in the town that it is forbidden to give directions to a stranger of where someone is staying. This is one of the laws in the town. Why? Don't ask me. This is the laws. So the son had to figure out where his father would stay. So he used his wisdom to try to figure out which part of town, which inn he would stay in. But even once he had the place where he stayed, he's like, I don't know how to get there. He can't ask directions. How do you get to this inn? They won't tell him directions. So he did something very, very smart. He goes over he sees somebody over there in the entrance of the town. He's cutting wood. And he says, I want to buy some wood for you, but can you deliver also? He says, yeah, delivery is included. So he goes, he buys a bunch of wood. He says, where do you want to deliver? He says, I want to deliver to this inn where I'm staying. And he didn't know where this inn was, the person who purchased it, but obviously the wood chopper did know. So the wood chopper says, it's not a problem. He goes, he pays him for the wood, and he leads him to the inn. He gets to the inn, and all of a sudden this wood chopper goes over to the innkeeper and says, I have your wood. He says, what wood? He says, never ordered wood. He says, what do you mean? This guy just paid for all the wood. He says, I never ordered it. And then this guy sees him and he says, oh, wait a minute. He says, maybe this is how we figure out where the inn is. And he thought maybe this is his son. So he goes, he says this is sign number one, that maybe this guy is the wisdom. He was able to manipulate the system and figure out where his father stayed. So he said, why don't you join us for lunch? Lunch is happening, I want you to join us. He said, oh, fine. So the owner of the inn was eating lunch with his family, and he had 5 hens. And there was, there were 2, 4, 6, there were 7 people. There were 7 people. There was the man and his wife, the innkeeper and his wife. He had 2 sons, 2 daughters, and this person, and this guest. And the innkeeper said, why don't you split it up? Why don't you divvy up the portions? So he's like, no, I don't want to. It's really not my place. And the innkeeper pushed him. He wanted to see, does this guy have wisdom? So the guy goes, and he gets pressured, and he says, fine, okay, you know what? I'll divvy up the portions. So he has 5 hens. He has 7 people. He's like, how am I going to split this up? There's no way it's going to be even. I can't give one to the husband, one to the wife, and then there's 3 left, and I give, one to the boys, one to the girls, and one to me, because that sounds, doesn't look bad. And any way that he broke it up, it didn't look good. So what he decided, this is what he did. He goes and he takes the 5 hens, after obviously they cook. Between the husband and the wife, he put 1. Between the 2 boys, he put another 1. Between the 2 girls, he put another 1, and he took 2 for himself. He says, listen, that's what. And the innkeeper was like, the chutzpah this guy has. He comes to my house, he takes more than everybody else, but he didn't say anything. He says, fine, you want to play that way? Let's play that way. He goes, then dinner comes. And he says, please, why don't you join us at dinner? And he says, yeah, of course, I'll join for dinner. And he says, why don't you divvy up the portions now again? And now they roasted a chicken, full chicken. And he says, really, it's not my place. Like, again, this guy's doing me. He's like, I'm not interested. He says, no, I want you to do it. So he says, fine. So he goes and he takes this, he takes the chicken. He takes the head of the bird and he gives it to the innkeeper. And he takes the inside of the bird, the innards of the bird, and he gives it to the wife. He takes the legs, he gives it to the sons, and he takes the wings and he gives it to the daughter. What is he left with? The body of the bird. He takes the entire body for himself. So the innkeeper is like, he had enough. He's like, unbelievable. The chutzpah that you have, the audacity, you come to my house. How do you explain yourself? So he says, listen, it's very simple. He says, this visitor goes to the innkeeper and he says, it's dangerous. The sages tell us it's dangerous to deal with peers. Right? It's dangerous. The Gemara that speaks about it regarding demons. Dangerous to deal in peers. So he said, in lunch, I had to figure out how am I going to give everybody a meal that it's not associated with peers because it's dangerous. So I said, I'll take you and your wife. You're a peer, but then I'll add you a hen, so now you're 3. You're not no longer a peer. I'll take the husband, the 2 boys, and then another hen. Now you're not a peer anymore. I'll take the 2 girls, they're a peer, and now you put a hen inside. Now they're not a peer anymore. Now, by me, I can't have 1 hen. It's going to be a peer. So I took both hens. I took a hit for the team. He says, when you went and you wanted me to divvy up the chicken, he says, the head of the chicken, it goes to you because you're the head of the household. As a blessing that you should continue to be the head of the household. The innards was given to the wife because the wife goes and she's the one who raises the children, who brings more children. This is a blessing that the innards should be more successful, should bear more fruit, and you should have more children. He says, I gave the legs to the boys. The boys are the ones that uphold the house, so they got the legs. I gave the wings to the girls because the girls, when they get married, they fly away and they go to their husband's nests. And you don't want them to come back. Because if they come back, that means the marriage didn't work out so well. So he says, you want them to go. So I gave you the wings so that they should go and they shouldn't come back. So he says, why did you take the body of the bird to yourself? So he said, the body of the bird represents like a boat. I came here in a boat and I want to leave here in a boat. As soon as you give me my father's possession, I'm out of here. So he said, and the son goes and says, now I showed you 3 signs of wisdom. And he says, you're right. He gave them the items that the father left, and he left. So you think about the wisdoms that they had. There was another interesting story that there were 4 people that came from Jerusalem. They went to visit Athens in Greece. So when they went over there, they went to this hotel, and the hotel only had 3 beds. There were 4 people that were coming, and he didn't want to lose income on a 4th person. He had 1 bed that had a broken leg. So what he did is that he set up the bed to be like leaning against the other bed, so it sort of looked like it was a good bed. So the innkeeper went, they all paid for the room, and he all showed them to their beds. Now, when they went to the beds, the innkeeper said, that it was widely known that the wisdom of Jerusalem went out. In fact, you had Roman noblemen that actually went to, you look at history, they went to Jerusalem, they went to study the wisdom. It was a very, very known and popular thing. So he said, I have 4 people from Jerusalem coming here. Let me eavesdrop, let me hear the wisdom. So the first person goes and he's laying on a bed and he says, He says, you think I'm sleeping on a bed? He tells his friends. He says, I'm sleeping on the ground that is suspended by air. He says, this is not a bed. So one of the other guy goes, says, you think the beds are bad? He says, the food that we ate tonight tasted like dogs. And the third man said, you think that's bad? He said, the wine that we had tonight tasted like the grave. And the fourth man says, I'm not surprised. He says, this is not the father's son, meaning that this is an illegitimate child. He says, he's born out of impurity and he can't do anything right, correctly, perfectly. So the guy is listening to this. Imagine the innkeeper, right? He's got the cup to the wall. He's listening to all this. And he's like, what? He says, they were right 1 out of 4. The only thing that they were right is that this bed was broken. They were sleeping, they suspended in the air. But you know how it goes. Once you have something running in your mind, you're like, okay, let me go check on it. Like imagine somebody goes and tells you, by the way, check the sky outside. It's like purple. I'll be like, okay, I don't have time. Right? But like 3 seconds later, you'd be like, oh no, I have to check it now. And you walk across the room like you can't. Like the second that something is in your mind, like if I tell you right now, like, oh, you have such a scratch on your nose, right? It's okay, go ahead. So like do you feel that? Do you feel the scratch? Oh man. Now you're fighting on it. Right? So I'll close my eyes, you can go and scratch it. Like this, you don't feel a breeze on your nose, it's fine. There's no itch. So it's the ear. Oh, your ears. Okay, maybe I should use that for girls. Right? So by the way, girls do that. My daughter, sometimes she's like, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, are you starting for a fight? Like, what's going on? Like, are you preparing? Like, hold my earrings, hold my baby, like, hold my purse, let's go. And they think about it like just subconsciously, like it constantly, falls out. But in any case, so when you're thinking about something, it's like, so it's in his mind, and in his mind, he's like, wait a minute. He's like, maybe they're right about, so he goes to the butcher, and he goes to the butcher and he says, I want to buy more of the meat that I bought from you today. And the butcher says, no, I'm sorry, it's all sold out. He says, can you tell me, it was so delicious. He says, can you tell me about this meat? He says, to be honest, we had a lamb, and the mother, died, and we needed to have, the lamb was still nursing. So I had a dog that was nursing, and the lamb nursed from the dog. And the innkeeper's like, what? He's like, they were able to taste what the meat tastes like from the, he's like, no. He's like, he's like, no, like 1,000 times. He runs to the wine. And he says, I want to buy some more from the wine merchant. He says, I want to buy some more of the wine that you sold me. And he says, I'm sorry, I sold it out. He says, the wine was so delicious. Can you tell me more about it? He says, listen, the vine actually grew on top of my father's grave. My father was a big kind of, and he's just like, oh, I don't care anymore. Right? He says, the wine grew on top of the grave. They tasted the grave. And finally, so far, the Jerusalem people were right 3 out of 4. He's like, wait a minute. He says, what about me? My illegitimate child? He runs over to his mother. He says, Ma, come on. Tell me what's going on over here. And she told him. She says, yeah, you're not your father's son. And he was beyond himself. And he's like, you know what? He says, what am I going to do? It's like, everyone's going to find out. Now you get a TV show if you have an illegitimate child. Like back then, it was embarrassment to do that. Even for the non-Jews, it was an embarrassment. So he said, what am I going to do? So he had some power in the government. He says, from now on, let's not allow Jews no one's allowed to host Jews anymore in Athens. He says, we can't let the secret coming out. So this law was passed, and then at one point they had a Jew that was visiting Athens, and he tried to get a place to sleep. No one would offer him a place to sleep, and finally he figured out he'll go to a store. It was a wine store, and he'll sort of stay there, and he'll spend the night there. So the wine merchant saw him, and he was trying to figure out, how do I get this person out of the store? Like he realized that his purpose was he wanted to sleep here for the night. So the wine merchant goes to him and says, listen, he says, we have a policy. He says, I see you want to stay the night. No problem. You could stay the night, but we have a policy that before someone stays the night, you have to take 3 very large jumps. He says, why? I have no idea, but I follow the rules. So what was his plan? His plan was that he said, you jump towards the door. He gets close to the door, he pushes him out and locks the door. That was his day. Meanwhile, the guy from Yerushalayim, he figured out what he was saying, and he was like, 3 jumps? I don't understand what you mean. Can you show me? So the guy says, yeah, sure. Just like this. And he goes, 1, 2, 3, and 3 jumps. He's by the door. He goes outside. The guy closes the door, locks it, and he's like, we'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, listen, I only did to you what you wanted to do to me. He's like, so you had over there, and these are stories that the Chazal tell us. This is not stories of like children's books, and there was a wise man with a long beard in Jerusalem, and this is like the story of the Chazal. They were known for their wisdom. In fact, even the servants were known to be wise, and we're almost finished. Even the servants was known to be wise. There was once a person that spent 3.5 years in Jerusalem because he wanted to gain wisdom. He wanted to get the wisdom of the Jewish people. But for 3.5 years, he left frustrated. He's like, I can't understand him. I don't understand anything. And he's frustrated and he leaves. Before he leaves, he figures, let me buy a slave. I need a slave. He goes and he buys a slave. Somehow, he ended up buying a slave that was blind in one eye. And they didn't even realize it. That's how smart they were. Right? Imagine. They went and they sold him a blind slave. So he's traveling. He says, wait a minute, my slave. He goes back to the slave merchant and he says, listen, what did you do? You sold me a blind slave. You sold me, he's blind in one eye. So the slave merchant, I guess with his wisdom, he says, listen about this guy, the slave is so smart. Trust me, take it. Somehow he convinces him, he says, fine, you know what, I'll take it. So he takes this slave from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem, and he's walking down the street. And meanwhile, the slave all of a sudden goes to the owner and he says, listen, he says, in about 4 miles, there is a pregnant camel that's pregnant with twins that is carrying one side oil and one side wine, and it's being led by a Gentile, and it's blind in one eye. We should reach up to it. We should catch up to it. So the guy, I just bought a blind slave. I'm like, one blind in one eye. I'm like, come on. I'm like, are you pulling my leg? He's like, what are you talking about? Like, how do you can't even see him? As he said, it's 4 miles out. He says, you can't even see that far. You can't even see with one eye. You're like, there's no way you could do that. Like, what are you pulling my leg? So the guy says, no, it's very simple. He says, I could prove it to you. And he goes and he says, when we're walking, I see camel footprints. And a camel footprints only last about 4 miles, meaning that they have to be within 4 miles. And then I see the grass is only eaten on one side, meaning that the camel must be blind on one side. And then I see where the camel rested, there was 2 indentations, meaning that it was pregnant with twins. And then I see as the camel is walking, there is one side, they're both leaking, but one side gets absorbed very quickly and another side does not get absorbed. Oil does not get absorbed. Wine gets absorbed very quickly. So it must be it's carrying one sack of wine and one sack of oil. As a fact, how do I know if it's a Gentile or not, is I see that this person relieved himself in the middle of the road. Jews don't relieve themselves in the middle of the road, they go to the side because they're modest. He says, it must be it's a Gentile. And he's like, what? No way. And he goes and they catch up, and it was 100% true. Everything that this servant was able to discern from that. So when we're looking what Jerusalem was lost, when the Jerusalem was destroyed, the first temple, we lost the wisdom as well. We're talking about a level that when people heard that people are coming from Jerusalem, they would set up a bench just to hear their wisdom. This is when people still honored wisdom and they respected, they wanted wisdom. You're talking about a time when we had so much, we don't even realize what we had. We really, really don't. Even as much as you learn it, you don't realize what we had. The population that we had, the center of Judaism that we had, the fact that we had the wisdom that the entire world thirsted for. Now, slowly it's getting back. In Korea, they learn the Talmud. And in certain places, they start learning the Jewish wisdom because they realize there's a lot, it stimulates the mind very, very well. So, finally, the final point that I want to bring out is the Jewish people also in Jerusalem were very into their reputation. And I'm not saying, what are you, Bukhari and I'm not going to marry into you. Not that type of fake, nonsense stuff. But rather, what it was that they would, the residents of Jerusalem would go and they would invite everybody to a banquet. They would invite them twice, just to make sure that it was a mistake. And not only that, once they invited them, so they would come in, and then they would put a handkerchief out by the window, by the door, to show that anybody's welcome to join us. If anybody wants, you're able to join us. And when there was no more room, they took a handkerchief off. And the people, when they came to eat, they would roll up their sleeves to show that they're not stealing any culture, they're not taking anything, to show that the reputation was so important. Also the fact that they wanted people to be honored so much, when they invited them over, they sent them the menu. And so how you RSVP, like, what do you want? Chicken, steak, fish. You could decide whatever you want beforehand. So to that extent, you're talking about a level of people that we don't understand. This is a level of that we had that we don't even realize what we lost. We don't realize the fact that this was the center. This is the purpose of creation. The purpose of it all was all about Jerusalem. So when we're coming in these days, we're mourning in these days. We're mourning for things that we don't even understand. So you either have 2 options. Either you start crying and mourning because you don't realize what you lost. You don't realize that you have a reason to cry. Or you mourn and you realize, look at what we lost. We lost the center of Judaism. We lost millions and millions of Jewish people, our families, our brothers, our sisters, were gone. We're brutally destroyed and murdered through hunger, through the sword, through very, very harsh circumstances. And most importantly at all, we lost the Bet Hamikdash. We lost the way that we can connect to God, where God would go and put his presence in this world. Where God would go and we would be able to realize that there is a God. We would be able to realize that there is a purpose into this world. And what is the purpose? Everything was centered around Yerushalayim. Everything was centered around the Bet Hamikdash. When we begin to think like that, we begin to understand what we need to mourn for. And once we begin mourning for something, then we could understand what we need to yearn for. And B'ezrat Hashem, once we start yearning for something, then B'ezrat Hashem will bring the Geula b'mehera b'yameinu. Any questions? No questions. Okay, that's nice and quick. Okay, Chazak. Okay, how late are we? Oh, not so bad.